graduate student, the textbook of Professor Cole, Limnology, for me was quite inspiring. And at the beginning of the book, Professor Cole showed this diagram of Rawson from 1939 that showed the geographical influence of several different factors that influence lake trophic state, and basically the geography in terms of latitude, longitude, that rules the climate in terms of precipitation, wind, and insolation, that in such a way that provides the distribution of heat and solid oxygen, and the seasonality of lake temperature and the other factors that rule the trophic state. As well, we have the topography influencing the lake morphometry, as well as the drainage area with all the inflows from land-based area, like river inflows, for instance. Lake morphometry, we have the depth, the area, and the bottom conformation that rules the nature of the bottom deposits and the inflow of allochthon materials, the transparency, light penetration, heat penetration, and stratification. The geology, of course, in terms of the quality and nature of the substrate is quite important, like the soils in the watershed and the type of sediments in the lake. And the last but not least important issue is the human impact in terms of sewage, agriculture, and even mining effluents that may promote intensive flows of nutrients that it will increase the trophic state of lakes. So this diagram from the late 1930s is still up to date. And a lot of people have been working basically in this kind of idea, making limnology a more integrative study and approach to solve contemporary problems of water quality and quantity. Well, after that, I'm very interested in the approach of Professor Lewis with the tropical limnology, the factors that rule the behavior, the thermal behavior of tropical lakes. Professor Lewis has studied several African lakes, particularly the deepest lakes in Africa. And what he brings our attention is the left graph here, show the small difference between the temperature from the surface, from the bottom. And this difference is a function of latitude. For lower latitude, we have a very small difference from surface to the bottom. For instance, in the southeastern Brazil, where I live, we have a temperature difference about 6 degrees between the surface and the bottom of the lake during the summer. As far we go up north and south, the difference of temperature increase with the bottom at 44 Celsius degrees, which is the maximum density of the water. I mean, in terms of the change of density, we have a huge difference of density in tropical waters, because this sort of anomaly behavior of water in terms of higher temperature promoting a lot of density. So that's why tropical lakes may stratify with a very small difference of temperature. That brings us sort of a problem, because the traditional definition of the thermocline concept that we have to decrease 1 Celsius degrees every meter deep, it doesn't work, particularly for shallow tropical lakes or moderate tropical lakes. People in the tropics have been working with a much smaller difference of temperature to locate the thermocline, which has been a very difficult task in tropical limnology. Well, Brazilian lakes and climate change. So Brazil, it's a very large country with different kind of climates and different water resources. We have 12 hydrographic regions from the Amazon basin, which is well known, with more than 4 million square kilometers of drainage basin, and many lakes that are from human origin, like reservoirs, this number of reservoirs, about 7,000 reservoirs with 38,000 square kilometers of water surface. And most of the reservoirs are located in the northeastern Brazil, in the semi-arid area, and along the Paraná, Paraguay river basin to provide energy, particularly hydroelectricity. And in terms of natural lakes, Brazil has about 15, almost 16,000 lakes with an area of 54,000 square kilometers, with the smallest lake from 18 hectares towers to 10,336 square kilometers, which is located in a coastal lake, actually a lagoon in the southeasternmost part of Brazil, in Rio Grande do Sul, Patos Lagoon, with 10,000 square kilometers. It's a huge system. Well, these systems in Brazil, the natural lakes, we have mostly the genesis of fluvial processes, like here in the Amazon basin, like alluvial lakes in the Amazon basins, and the lakes in the Pantanal, a huge wetland system in the central west of Brazil, and taking part of Bolivia and Paraguay with the Paraguay humedales, which means the Pantanal or wetlands in terms of a Spanish word. And also we have a it's very common feature in Brazil, coastal lakes, and among them lagoons, which has connection with the sea, a permanent of temporary connections. So the genesis of geomorphology of Brazilian lakes is pretty much associated with fluvial activity and coastal processes. That means that Brazilian lakes are quite shallow, right? And the main types of natural lakes are floodplain lakes, the alluvial lakes, and coastal lakes. Well, in terms of the scenery of climate change, the Brazilian panel for climate change have been addressing changes up to 2040 with an increase of 0.5 to 1 Celsius degrees, and an increase of rainfall of 5 to 10% in terms of volume. But actually, this is not the same for the entire country. Actually, part of the country will become wet and other part will become dry. So this will have a great influence about the amount of water in river basins and especially in lake basins. For 2041, 2070, the scenario, the provisions, the trends is worsening a little bit with the increasing of temperature. And from 2041 to 2070, from 2.5 to 3 Celsius degrees of temperature increase. Well, in an interesting paper from several Brazilian limnologists, like addressing climate change in Brazilian perspective of biogeochemistry of inland water, they came up with different scenarios of different biomes of Brazil, and particularly the biome of the Brazilian Atlantic rainforest in the southeastern coast and south coast of Brazil, where I live. And they proposed this scenario with rising of temperature and changes in the frequency of precipitation, increasing the number of storms in the summer as a result of increased flooding events in the biome. Which in turn would temporarily increase the flooded area in the size of aquatic ecosystems. Well, actually, this scenario is showing us that we have a more prolonged, extended dry periods and very intensive rainfall events, particularly during the summer. So our climate here in this southeastern part of Brazil is a wet summer and a mild, dry winter. Well, the case study of Lower Dulce River Valley, where we have been working since the late 10, 15 years, more or less. So this is the basin of Dulce River. This is, you might know a little bit about this basin because that was the place of the site of the very amazing environmental disaster with the collapse of iron ore slurries in November 2015. So The watershed drains about 86,000 square kilometers, which is a medium-sized watershed. And sorry, I forgot to put here the number of the municipalities and the population. So, excuse me. The collapse of Fundão mining tillage dam, iron ore, spilled about 36 million cubic meter to the upper river Doce River Valley. So this is the location of the iron ore dam, the tillage dam. And the tillage, the slurry, came all the way to the Atlantic Ocean through about 660 kilometers of river channel. And as soon as it gets to the coastal ocean, it spreads towards to the north and a little bit to the south. Well, it was amazing because nobody was expecting this kind of disaster, although there are many tillage dams in the basin of Doce River, in many of them in high risk of collapse. So this is a sort of announced disaster. And there are many other watersheds in the country with this sort of slurry tillage dams. So the slurry, the disaster happened in November 5, and the slurry reached the coast on November 21st. And the way down to the coast, it changed a lot about the ecology and limnology of the rivers and also the coastal lakes. The intrusion of slurry in the lakes of Lower Doce River Valley on January 2006 during the first flood appeared after the dam collapsed. So the Lower Doce River Valley is this part of the basin here where we have a collection of lakes, different lakes. I'm going to show you. But this system is undergoing several pressures, environmental pressures, like shoreline construction, cattle on the lake shore, sewage inputs, effluents from distillery, air application of pesticides, water withdrawal and irrigation, invasion of introduction actually of exotic species like tucunaré and pirarucu from the Amazon basin, as well as piranha as well, and exotic species even from Africa like tilapia, which has been a very important species for fish farming in the area. So water withdrawal is very severe in the area. So people rely on lake water to irrigate, especially coffee. And that has been promoting, agriculture has been promoting a lot of soil erosion. And most part of the lake watersheds has about 70, even 80% of pasture land and agriculture uses. So that's why water quality in the lakes has been decreasing a lot with many cyanobacterial blooms, and some of them with potential production of biotoxins. And fish farming as well is another issue in the area, and because it provides a lot of so I'm sorry, this is wrong. So working with this climate aspect of Lower Doce River Valley, we have the climate in the area with a wet season that goes during the summer, actually from more or less November to late March, and then a transitional season in April, May, and then the dry season with rainfall less of 15 millimeters per month. So the dry season is our winter, and temperature is a little bit mild for the European or North American standards, for instance, with a lower temperature, mean lower temperature about 20 degrees. And then another transitional zone in the early spring and the wet season again. So this rainfall regime has a lot of effects on the river discharge. Like here we have mean values of river discharge next to about 100 kilometers upstream from the river mouth. And what we have been seeing here is the water discharge of the river have been decreasing along the time. and it's facing like the kind of very a system that are responding with pulses of very intensive precipitation instead of have a more base flow, more regular base flow along the year. So this is the total river discharge around the years. So from 2013, we have a decrease in the river discharge, characterizing sort of dry conditions with river discharge of less than 23 cubic kilometers per year. So in this area here, we have been taking part of my monitoring program for aquatic biodiversity in terms of the environmental impacts of the iron ore slurry that came out all the way towards to the ocean. And we have been working with 6 lakes, 3 lakes in the alluvial plain, like Lake Paraná, this big one here with almost 62 square kilometers, Lake Nova with 15 square kilometers, and Lake Limão. Limão is 4.2 square kilometers of surface, and 3 lakes in the coastal plain, which are very small and shallow, like Areal, and Monsaraz. Monsaraz, this one is actually is a lagoon. Well, in January 26, 2016, this slurry entered. There was an intrusion of this slurry in the lower Nova Lake, when the first flood of the Doce River after the dam collapsed provided this sort of intrusion of the slurry with trace elements and nutrients such as phosphorus and nitrogen into the lake. Well, we have been working with the thermal responses of this lake because to understand the environmental impacts of trace elements in the aquatic biota, we need to understand the functional and the dynamics of aquatic ecosystems. For instance, we have been working with relative thermal resistance to mixing. So here we can see that the alluvial lakes, such as Nova and Limão, respond more for more prone for stratification, actually a very strong stratification, thermal stratification during the summer, while the big lake Paraná is not that deep, it's about 16 meter deep, Paraná maximum deep, doesn't respond that much in terms of thermal responses, just because this is a very wide, more wide lake, like almost 4 kilometers of breadth and 19 kilometers along the main axis, lake axis. Well, 3 of these lakes, like Nova, Palmas, and Palminas, so these are alluvial lakes that we have been working more times previous to this monitoring program. Like Lake Palmas, we have found depths about 50 meters, the maximum depth. That's why we are thinking that this lake might be the deepest natural lake in Brazil, and not only for the maximum depth, but also for the mean depth. And the theoretical water retention time is about almost 20 years. So it takes a lot of very long to renew all the water of these lakes that can make these lakes very susceptible, vulnerable for eutrophication and contamination as well. Lake Nova is a little bit larger, like a 15 square kilometer. It's 33 meter deep, and it can take about 13.4 years to renew the water. And this lake is quite unique. This is Palminas Lake. It's very dendritic. The shoreline development index is about 8. Then we have a maximum depth of 31 meter, and the mean theoretical retention time about 70 years. So it's very long. That's why this lake is undergoing a very intense eutrophication state. Actually, not only the inflows of nutrients from the watershed, as we can see here, the ratio of drainage area and the lake area provide a very fast inflow from the watershed, which is a small watershed of 60 square kilometer. And also we have here 4 fish farm facilities, tilapia farming facilities that provide a lot of nutrients to the lake. So, but the lake that we would like to address today is Lake Terra Alta. Terra Alta would mean highlands. I mean, it's not that high because the lake is about 20 meters above the sea level. But anyway, this is the local name that we give. Terra Alta is a smaller lake, 3.9 square kilometer with a volume of 39 million of cubic meters with a maximum depth of 24 meters, mean 9.9, and the depth of wave base, 3.8. The wave base means the depth of the lake that is influenced by wind turbulence and can separate shallow areas where sediment resuspension can happen from deeper areas. So it's a quite interesting morphometric parameter. The Watershed Lake is 144 square kilometers. This is the map of the watershed. Most of the watershed is agriculture and pasture land, and the ratio of watershed and lake area is 36.9. And so a larger ratio, that means that the flows can be intercepted by, for instance, wetlands and even impoundments that local owners of land can dam the rivers before reach the lake. And the theoretical water retention time is about 1.8 years, so it's quite good. So the flushing time is quite faster, and this could create a higher carrying capacity for fish farming comparing to the other lakes. So just to have an idea, I'm showing a little bit of some perspective of the lake. So we have a change in the geomorphology. So the sedimentary rocks in this lower part of the lake and the granite rocks in the upper part of the lake. Here we can see the fish tanks floating at the surface of the lake and intensive agriculture with coffee plantation. Actually, not the best management practices with high rates of soil erosion. So Lake Terra Alta is becoming eutrophic each year with the amount of nutrients from fish farming as well from the soil erosion. So we have been working here measuring the flows of rivers in terms of water, sediments, and nutrients. Well, we want to make a sort of a nutrient budget for this lake to understand what are the real threats to Lake Terra Alta. So this is the image of fish farming. So fish are fed 3 times a day and a huge amount of phosphorus per year associated with fish food. So in June 2014, we assembled a low budget system for a climate monitoring system and water temperature system. And it started to work since June 2014 and until June 2018. Climate data were recorded every 15 minutes and lake water temperature every hour. Data download and maintenance of the system once a month, and physical chemical profiling once a month again. So here we can see our group, our crew, working in the floating platform, downloading climate data, as well the onset tidbit temperature data. And every month, we usually do a sort of water profiling with a CTD for temperature, conductivity, salinity, and depth. And also with a multi-parameter for dissolved oxygen, turbidity, redox, and conductivity, and other parameters. This on here is quite interesting because it measures raw fluorescence along the water column, like a chlorophyll and phycocyanin. So we can get a very detailed distribution of phytoplankton in the water column, and also the measurement of light available in the system. So here the pictures show us about 1% of light is available at 7 meters deep. After that, this is the aphotic zone. Well, I forgot to mention that we managed to assemble the system in the fish farming facility. We made an agreement with the fish farmers so we could provide them data about water quality, and that was very important for them because there was a very intensive event of anoxic event that killed almost 95% of tilapia in the hearing system. That was happened at the end of stratification season of 2015. So then they could take care of the facility for us, preventing vandalism or, other issues. The main issue that we had there was a lake water that sometimes left some gifts for us in the platform. But everything went well after a while. So the temperature and climate data from the meteorological station, for the temperature, we had a little bit of increase of temperature in 2016, was a little bit warmer comparing to the other years. And in terms of rainfall as well, the rainfall was very intensive in 2015, but at the end, 2015 was a very dry year. Even 2014, 15, and the beginning of 2016, very intensive drought over the southeastern part of Brazil. It was a very intensive event that caused a lot of water security issues in this part of the country. So in terms of the water column, we could see here that the stratification season starts at the late autumn and goes into the late spring with very strong stability in the water column, with difference of temperature about 6 degrees from the surface to the bottom. And the amazing feature was the year of 2016, because there was the reduction of the water level in the lake because of the drought. And the picture here doesn't show, we still need to correct this before to submit the paper for a journal. We had about 2 meters decrease in the water depth in this time of the year, in this period of the year. So the temperature, the mean water temperature in the water column, the black line, and the red line show the mean water temperature at the surface. And then the blue line we can see the mean depth of the bottom water, about 10 meters deep. And here we can realize that we had a warming of the bottom of the lake from 2015 to 2016. Might be associated with this reduction of water volume. And then the heat content stability and lake number, showing us that the highest stability happened from the end of 2015 to the early 2016. That was the most intensive and dramatic event. And after the first frontal system, the cold fronts that come from the south of the continent, from Patagonia, reached this region here at the end of April and early May 2016, that caused the mix of the water column, and the anox bottom water came all the way to the surface and caused a massive fish kill in the lake. So just to have an idea about the behavior of other parameters along the water column, for instance, this is a typical profiling of temperature, dissolved oxygen, and chlorophyll and phycocyanin for a stratification summer, like March 2015. So we have the aphotic zone about 7.5 meter. The Secchi disk reading is about 2.5 meter, and decreasing temperature all the way to the bottom. And actually the temperature here is in red, and decreasing dissolved oxygen towards to the bottom, and increasing phytoplankton pigments towards to 1% of light, featuring the maximum meta-eliminatic concentration of phytoplankton in chlorophyll. So we would expect that chlorophyll, the biomass of phytoplankton, would be next to the surface, but actually they are well adapted for low light but nutrient-rich environment. In the winter, so everything changed. So the water is mixed from the bottom to the surface. So temperature is a more isothermal profile and dissolved oxygen as well. But the Secchi disk reduces a little bit with a decrease in the faultic zone. So most of alluvial lakes behave like this. Some are more intense changes, like Terra Alta and Palminas and Palmas, and others are more light changes, like Palminas Lake, for instance. So I brought here two pictures to show the effects of water level fluctuations on Lake Terra Alta. The left picture was taken in August 28, so during the dry season. So from the platform here to the shore, we have about 2 meter high, okay? And in January, so the lake level is pretty higher. So then we got need to investigate this effect of water level fluctuations in the lake thermal responses and dynamics. So then we used the CTD data to check about how severe was the water level fluctuations in the lake. So we ended up with a value about 2 meters in average for this period of August 14 to October 16 in terms of reduced depth of the Lake Terra Alta. And then the depth increased a little bit. So then we managed to measure to the morphometric data of the lake, assuming that 2011, when the hydrographic survey was carried out as a standard year with the lake area and the volume and the maximum depth and the mean depth. And the scenario of 2015 with less 2 meters of water column, a decrease of 7.9% of lake area and 18.9% of lake volume, 8.2% in maximum depth, and 11.8% in terms of maximum depth in the lake. So then the question arises about what are these effects in terms of lake metabolism, lake functioning. And we start to study this issue in terms of lake water fluctuations. And then we found this paper from Zohari and Ostrovsky from 2011 addressing this water level fluctuations, which is caused by extreme hydrological events, droughts and floods. Actually, the word extreme is very depends a lot of configuration, the physical setting of different lakes. What can be extreme is very regular for another place. But I mean, the extreme hydrological events cause an increase in annual and interannual fluctuation of water level. So this brings changes in lake littoral zone, which implies in a loss of biodiversity habitats, a loss of littoral habitats, which implies in a biodiversity loss for aquatic invertebrates and even fish. So changes in lake volume may bring an increased mixing in layer thickness and a decrease of hypolimnion layer, particularly in deep lakes. So this may influence the internal nutrient cycling and then affect the eutrophication system. Changes in the littoral zone may also affect the internal nutrient cycling and can contribute to eutrophication of the system. So what we can expect with a lower volume, the epilimium or the mixing layer would become thicker, and then a reduction of the hypolimnion system, so nutrients would be more available to the euphotic zone, and the eutrophication could be more intensive with phytoplankton blooms, and particularly cyanobacterial blooms. Well, this is what we thought to address for today. If you have any question, I would be very pleased to try to answer. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Gilberto. This was a really nice lecture.